Tonight's stories are explosive. Betrayal between sisters, a husband who only wanted his marriage when the money ran dry, and families torn apart over shocking secrets. From divorce drama to a pregnancy bombshell, these Reddit AITA stories will have you questioning who's really in the wrong and who's just pretending to be the victim. Before we dive in, if you love these dramatic AITAH stories and want to help us reach 10,000 subscribers, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. Your support means everything. Now, let's get into it. Am I the asshole for announcing my sister's pregnancy after finding out my boyfriend, now ex, was the father? Ryder, a 19-year-old, thought she was in a normal relationship with her boyfriend of the same age. But then came the discovery that flipped her entire world upside down. Her boyfriend wasn't just hers. He had also been sleeping with her 18-year-old sister and got her pregnant. Let's stop there for a moment. Imagine the sting of that betrayal, not from a stranger, not from someone on the outskirts of life, but from the two closest people in Ryder's world, her partner and her own sister. That's not just a break in trust, that's devastation layered with humiliation. Ryder didn't blow up immediately. She didn't scream or expose them in private. No. She held it all in, biting down on the pain and betrayal, waiting for the right moment. And when that moment came, when the family was gathered together, Ryder dropped the truth like a bomb. Her sister was pregnant, and the father was none other than her boyfriend. The reaction was instant chaos. The boyfriend, suddenly realizing his game was over, bolted. He didn't stick around to face the consequences. He ran. And the sister? She broke down, sobbing, begging Ryder not to hate her, promising to fix it by aborting the pregnancy if it meant keeping her sister's love. That moment alone shows how guilty she was, how much she knew she had crossed a line that could never really be uncrossed. Here's another layer to the story. The sister had been living with Ryder since April because things with their parents weren't good. Ryder had even been planning a bigger move so they could share a better space. That plan, gone. Just like that. Ryder refused to live with her again. Instead, she packed her own things and left to stay at a friend's place, leaving her sister stranded. Now, the sister can't afford the apartment without Ryder. Their parents won't take her back either. The boyfriend vanished completely, washing his hands of responsibility. Typical coward move, leaving her to deal with the wreckage he helped cause. And as for Ryder, she has cut off her sister entirely. No relationship, no forgiveness, no acknowledgement of her attempts to make amends. But of course, family never stays quiet. One of their aunts stepped in, pointing the finger at Ryder. She said Ryder was disgusting for humiliating someone so young in front of the whole family, that she had ruined her sister's life. And what did Ryder say? She told her aunt to pick up the pieces herself and leave her out of it. Ryder didn't care anymore. As far as she was concerned, her sister made her choice the second she started sleeping with her boyfriend. The aunt didn't stop there. She pushed harder, saying it was nasty business to let a man come between two sisters. She asked Ryder the sharpest question of all. Could she live with herself if her sister had the baby and ended up homeless on the street? But Ryder stood her ground. She said it had nothing to do with her anymore. Now let's look at this honestly. Is Ryder the asshole here? No. She is a betrayed woman who was hurt not once but twice by the people who should have respected her most. Her boyfriend and her sister weren't just careless, they were selfish, reckless, and cruel. Ryder didn't ruin her sister's life. Her sister did that all on her own when she decided that lust was more important than loyalty. Yes, Ryder could have confronted her sister privately, but let's be real. Why should she protect her sister's dignity when her sister had no problem destroying hers? The family deserved to know the truth, and Ryder made sure they did. This isn't about letting a man come between them. This is about betrayal, about breaking bonds that should have been sacred. Ryder didn't break her family. Her sister and ex did. So, no, Ryder is not the asshole. She's someone who finally stood up and refused to carry the shame of other people's choices. The real question is whether her sister will ever take accountability, or if she'll just keep shifting blame onto the one person she hurt the most. And with that, this story closes on betrayal, raw pain, and a sisterhood shattered beyond repair. But just like always, the next story will bring another impossible question. When love, loyalty, and betrayal collide, Who's truly at fault? Am I the asshole for following through with filing for divorce after my husband lost his job? Ryder begins with 6 years of marriage, 9 years together. That's a long stretch of time, full of ups and downs. But here, the downs outweigh everything else. And the biggest wound? The way her husband speaks to her. Words that cut deeper than any physical blow. Ryder just had their son only a year ago. She was 10 months postpartum, still carrying baby weight, still adjusting to the exhausting new rhythm of life. Waking nights, working full time, raising not just a baby, but 4 other children, 3 still minors. That's 5 kids in her care while also juggling a 40-hour work week. And in the middle of all that, her husband, her partner, the man who should have been her greatest support, looked at her and said she was fat and lazy. Let's stop here. That's not just a passing insult. That's cruelty at its most intimate. He wasn't offering support. He wasn't lifting her up. He was tearing her down during one of the most vulnerable stages of her life. Then came her birthday, a day that should have been about celebration, love, and appreciation. Instead, her husband demanded she not leave the house or else he'd divorce her. Divorce over something as trivial as leaving the house. But life doesn't pause for ultimatums. Her daughter had a dental appointment at UCLA, so Ryder went. And what did she get in return? Silence. No hello, no happy birthday, just her husband retreating to his game room. He's been sleeping there ever since. 2 months passed. He began telling everyone else, family, friends, anyone who would listen, that he was divorcing her. He even spoke with an attorney. And all this before ever looking her in the eye and telling her himself. To top it off, he demeaned her, saying she wasn't the prize, that at almost 40 with kids, she was past her worth. He declared himself the prize, claiming he was in his prime, making good money, and that any woman would be lucky to take her place. He even invited his ex, the mother of his child, into their home while Ryder was away. Now pause here. This isn't just disrespect. This is humiliation. This is betrayal layered with arrogance. This is a man building himself up by destroying the woman who has stood beside him, raised his children, and built a life with him. And then life flipped. He lost his job. Suddenly, the divorce talk quieted. Suddenly, he spoke more kindly. Suddenly, he wasn't the prize flaunting his options. He was vulnerable, uncertain, maybe even scared. And now, instead of, I'm leaving you, it became, wait, don't move yet. Let's try again. But Ryder saw through it. She wasn't blind to the timing. His kindness didn't stem from love, or remorse. It came from convenience, from desperation. She realized it wasn't about rekindling their marriage, it was about survival, about him having no better option. So Ryder decided she's still moving out. She's still following through with the separation. And now her husband is spinning a narrative, telling his family and friends that she's the gold digger, that she's leaving just because he lost his job, that she's the one giving up when he wanted to make it work. But let's get real. He made his choice months ago. He treated Ryder as disposable, as less than, as a placeholder until someone better came along. He burned the bridge, and now, when the ground is crumbling beneath him, he wants her to stay and hold it up. So, is Ryder the asshole for following through? Not even close. Ryder is reclaiming her dignity. She's choosing herself after years of being torn down. She's saying no to manipulation and half-hearted apologies born out of desperation. The truth is clear. Ryder isn't abandoning him because of his job loss. She's leaving because he abandoned her long before that. And that's where this story closes, with Ryder stepping into her own strength, finally putting action behind the truth she's known all along. But of course, Reddit always has more tales of heartbreak, drama, and raw human conflict. And just like this one, the next story will test where loyalty ends and self-respect begins. Would I be the asshole if I divorced my wife because she does not want me actively involved in raising our children? Ryder, a 32-year-old father, is living in a marriage where fatherhood itself feels like a crime. He and his wife, together since college, married for 7 years, share 3 children. But instead of being treated like a partner, Ryder is constantly shoved to the sidelines, like an outsider in his own family. Let's pause here. Imagine wanting nothing more than to hold your children, to feed them, to share in the simple joys of parenting, and being told, sometimes with anger, that you don't belong in those moments, that you should tidy, run errands, or just stay out of the way. That's the reality Ryder lives in. It wasn't always this way. When their first child was born, things were normal. But when his wife became pregnant with their twins, everything shifted. Suddenly, every attempt he made to bond with his children was interrupted. If he tried to hold one, she told him to go do something else. If he suggested family time, she took the kids and disappeared. And when the twins arrived, it became unbearable. Feeding, changing, rocking them to sleep, every little act of fatherhood sparked conflict. There's one moment that says it all. His wife was caught up on the phone with her sister, so Ryder stepped in. He put their oldest to bed, fed the twins, kept everything on schedule. Any other parent might have been grateful. But his wife, she exploded. She didn't care that it was done right. Her issue was that he had done it at all. That tells us something. This isn't about parenting choices. This is about control. And the accusations? She claimed he was trying to hog the kids. Hog them? This man is their father. How can spending time with your own children be considered selfish? But in his wife's eyes, every effort was an offense. She even screamed at him for baby wearing. Think about that. An act that strengthens father-child bonding, a beautiful way of keeping kids close, turned into yet another battlefield. It escalated further. Ryder once picked up the kids from her parents' house while she was at an appointment. A simple, logical decision. He was done with work, they were his kids. He wanted to be with them. Instead, he was yelled at for disrespecting her decision to leave them with her parents. Again, the message was clear. He wasn't an equal parent. He was secondary, replaceable, unnecessary. The breaking point came when his wife was hospitalized. For most families, this would be the moment a father naturally steps in, providing comfort, stability, and care for the children. And Ryder did just that. He took days off work, held down the fort, kept their children close. But instead of relief, his wife raged. She screamed at him from her hospital bed. She demanded the kids be left with her parents. She even sent them twice to try and take the children away. Just picture that. Your partner sick in the hospital, yet still so determined to strip you of your role as a parent that she calls in reinforcements to take your children from your arms. After that, Ryder had enough. He told her plain and simple, if this is the way it's going to be, we should divorce. And her reaction? She accused him of being the one destroying the family. She weaponized the idea of stability, saying divorce would ruin the children's lives. Even his own parents urged him to stay, to make it work. But how can you make it work when one person won't even acknowledge there's a problem, when therapy, compromise, and conversation are all off the table? So here's the question. Would Ryder be the asshole for divorcing his wife? Let's look at this honestly. No, Ryder would not be the asshole. In fact, he has been remarkably patient. He has tried again and again to show love, to parent, to be present, and every time he has been pushed out. This isn't a man abandoning his family. This is a man who's been abandoned in plain sight, treated like a guest in his own children's lives. The sad truth that kids need both parents. They deserve to see their father involved, nurturing, and engaged. What kind of message does it send if they only grow up seeing him dismissed, shut down, and erased? Divorce isn't always about destroying stability. It can be about protecting it, protecting a father's right to parent, protecting children's right to know their dad as more than just the guy who runs errands. Ryder isn't the asshole. He's a father desperate to do right by his kids, even if it means making the hardest choice of all. And maybe, just maybe, the real question isn't, would he be the asshole for divorcing? But how long can he keep sacrificing himself before his children grow up learning that a father's love doesn't matter? Am I the asshole? For serving my ex-wife divorce papers while she was at work? Throwaway account. The writer, 35 years old, was married to her wife, 33, for 8 years. On the surface, it looked like a love story worth admiring. College sweethearts who became best friends, partners who seemed unshakable. You know, the type of couple people look at and say, wow, they're made for each other. And for a long time, the writer believed that too. She thought she had found her forever. Her wife worked in marketing, came from a family with resources, and made more money while the writer pursued education. And here's the thing. Money was never supposed to be the measuring stick. What mattered was love, respect, teamwork. But deep down, maybe there was already an imbalance brewing, one that the writer didn't want to see. Because when you love someone, you convince yourself things are fine, even as the cracks start to spread. When the writer was promoted into an administrative role, life naturally got busier. And in those longer hours, in those moments of exhaustion, her wife began to slip away. At first, it was subtle, the kind of distance you almost gaslight yourself into ignoring. But then it became undeniable. The writer tried to pull them back together, suggesting date nights, reaching for conversations that went nowhere, even proposing counseling. Each attempt was swatted down. That's when the loneliness sets in. You're still technically married, but you feel like you're living with a stranger. And isn't that one of the most isolating places to be? Then came the late nights at the office, the endless excuses, the missed calls, and eventually, no return home at all. At some point, it stops being suspicion and starts being a truth you just don't want to say out loud. The writer knew deep down, but without proof, she held back. Because once you say it, once you accuse, it becomes real. That proof came in the form of a single devastating notification, a charge on their joint credit card, a trip to Australia, and not just for her wife. No, for her and the mistress. Imagine sitting there watching the evidence stack up, her laptop left open, emails confirming the trip, Instagram DMs gushing over the affair. The audacity, the arrogance. It's almost like her wife didn't care if she got caught, like the writer's feelings had already been written out of the equation. And so one night, the writer gathered her things and left, just like that. But here's where the knife twisted deeper. Her wife didn't call, didn't text, didn't even ask if she was safe. After 8 years together, she vanished from the home, and her wife treated it like she'd never existed. And honestly, that kind of silence, it's almost colder than the cheating itself. What adds salt to the wound is the irony. The mistress gets a glamorous trip overseas, a whole adventure planned. But in all their years together, the writer never once got a vacation like that. Think about what that says, not just about infidelity, but about priority. It wasn't that her wife couldn't give, it was that she chose not to when it came to the writer. Fast forward. The divorce was inevitable. The lawyers needed the papers served in person, but the writer couldn't stomach seeing her ex. So she suggested they be served at her ex's workplace, sometime between 3 and 5 p.m. To her, this was the cleanest, least personal option. No awkward run-in, no confrontation, just done. But then came the backlash. Friends whispering about humiliation, saying the writer crossed a line by dragging her ex's dirty laundry into the workplace. But her best friend stood firm. This was justice. An eye for an eye. And honestly, I lean toward that side too. Because here's the question. When someone spends months humiliating you, when they've shown you not an ounce of care, do they really get to complain about how they're handed the consequences? The writer wonders if she went too far. But let's stop here for a second. Was this cruel or was it simply fair? Her ex wasn't embarrassed because of some innocent mistake. She was embarrassed because her own actions finally caught up to her in a place she couldn't hide. So is the writer the asshole? No, absolutely not. The writer isn't the asshole for refusing to put herself through the trauma of facing someone who already destroyed her trust. She didn't choose this war. Her ex-wife did when she betrayed their marriage and flaunted it so openly. The embarrassment her ex felt wasn't created by the writer, it was the shadow of her own decisions catching up to her. In fact, I'd say the writer showed restraint. She could have blasted the affair publicly. She could have burned bridges louder and harsher. Instead, she let the papers speak for themselves. And that's the truth of it. The writer is not the asshole. She's a woman reclaiming her dignity in the only way she knew how. Am I the asshole? For telling my son's African American girlfriend that she can wear a wig even if my son doesn't want her to? The writer, a 37-year-old white woman, admits right from the start that she feels out of her depth here. And that honesty matters because this story isn't just about family dynamics. It's about cultural lines, identity, and the painful awkwardness of trying to say the right thing when you're terrified of saying the wrong one. The writer's son, just 14 years old, has his first girlfriend. She's 13, African American, and we'll call her Nina. When the writer first met Nina, she describes her as a bright, bubbly girl, the kind of kid who lights up a room, always smiling, always talking, full of confidence. But lately, the writer noticed a shift. That spark dimmed. Nina seemed quieter, less sure of herself, and it wasn't just her demeanor. She'd stopped wearing wigs, makeup, and jewelry. At first, the writer didn't connect the dots, but as any good storyteller knows, small changes often signal something bigger. One day, the writer was driving the two teens to a party. Her son was upstairs, running late, as teenagers do, while Nina waited downstairs. And here's where the story takes its emotional turn. The writer noticed Nina wasn't her usual self. She wasn't excited about the party. She looked like she was dreading it. And in that vulnerable moment, when most adults might just make small talk to avoid awkwardness, the writer asked her what was wrong. Nina admitted it. She didn't feel pretty. Imagine hearing that from a 13-year-old girl. At that age, self-image can already be brutal, but to hear it said so plainly with such heaviness hits differently. The writer pressed gently, asking why, and Nina explained she was still getting used to showing her natural hair. Now pause here because this is important. For a young African American girl, hair isn't just hair. It's cultural, it's personal, and it's political. It's tied to identity and confidence in ways that someone outside that experience may not fully grasp. And Nina was feeling the weight of that. When the writer asked why she was showing her natural hair if she wasn't comfortable yet, Nina revealed the heartbreaking piece. Her son thought she looked cooler this way. In other words, she wasn't doing it for herself. She was doing it for him. And in that moment, the writer reached back to her own teenage years. She remembered being a girl, doing things just to impress boys, changing, bending, adapting, not because she wanted to, but because she wanted to be wanted. And with that memory, she told Nina something simple. You don't have to. You can wear a wig, even if my son doesn't want you to. It was advice given out of care, out of empathy, out of trying to lift up a young girl who was clearly struggling. And for a moment, it might have even felt right, but sometimes even good intentions land wrong. Because days later, the writer says she's never seen her son so angry. He accused her of crossing a line, of being a white woman giving advice about how a black girl should look. He called her an overhearing mom, and even, this stings, a Karen. Imagine that, your own child, furious, hurling words at you like stones. And the writer, stunned, didn't even know how to respond. Now here's the commentary woven in. This is where the nuance matters. On one hand, the writer wasn't trying to dictate Nina's identity. She wasn't saying do this or don't do that. She was trying to give her permission, in a sense, to reclaim her comfort. To say your choices don't have to be for my son. They should be for you. That's not malicious, that's empathy. But on the other hand, context matters. The writer's son saw his white mother stepping into a space that wasn't hers. For him, it wasn't just about hair or self-confidence. It was about race, identity, and the discomfort of seeing his mom weigh in on a cultural struggle that she could never fully understand. To him, it probably felt like an overstep, like she was making herself the voice in a conversation that wasn't hers to lead. So is the writer the asshole? That's the heart of this question. I would say no, the writer isn't the asshole. She wasn't dictating how Nina should look. She was giving her the freedom to choose for herself, to not feel pressured by a boy, even if that boy was her son. That's valuable advice. But at the same time, this is one of those gray, delicate situations where intention and impact don't perfectly align. The intention was kindness. The impact, at least for her son, was offense. And maybe that's the lesson here. Sometimes we try to help and we stumble. Sometimes the most human thing is to admit we don't fully understand, but still try, because staying silent feels even worse. The writer may not have handled it perfectly, but in my eyes, she isn't the asshole. She's a mom who saw a young girl hurting and tried to ease that hurt. And if that makes her guilty of anything, it's of caring too much. Am I the asshole for calling my mother-in-law ill-mannered for going through my suitcase and criticizing my bikini? The writer had just gotten married in June. A fresh marriage, only about a year and a half into knowing her husband, and here they were finally on the brink of something every couple dreams of, the honeymoon. That magical trip where you leave behind the chaos of wedding planning, family drama, and obligations just to exist together. No interruptions, no expectations, just the two of them. But of course, nothing in life ever goes as smoothly as you hope. And sometimes the very people who should be celebrating your happiness are the ones who throw a wrench into it. The night before their honeymoon, the in laws came over to say goodbye. Now, that in itself wasn't unusual. They lived only half an hour away. But here's where things took a turn. The mother in law, well meaning on the surface, suggested the writer take some vitamin tablets for the trip. Innocent enough, right? She even offered to put them directly into the writer's suitcase. And this is the part where you can almost feel the hesitation from the writer. She politely declined at first, saying she'd put them in herself, but the mother in law insisted. And that's how it began, with something so small, so seemingly harmless. The writer relented, saying fine, she could put them in the inner zipper. And here's where the human part of the story hits. You can tell the writer was trying to avoid confrontation, trying to be polite, even though deep down she probably knew it wasn't the best idea to let someone rummage through her packed things. But politeness has a way of backfiring, because instead of simply slipping the vitamins into the zipper, the mother in law went further. She opened the suitcase, went through the clothes, and that's when she stumbled upon something the writer had packed especially for this once in a lifetime trip, a revealing bikini. Now imagine that moment. You're already feeling vulnerable. It's your private suitcase, your private belongings, and suddenly your mother in law is holding up your bikini, questioning you. And not just questioning the item, but questioning the very intention behind it. Are you really planning on taking this along? The embarrassment, the intrusion, the judgment layered right on top of it. The writer says she lost her cool, calling her mother in law ill mannered for going through private things. And honestly, can you blame her? That's not just crossing a boundary, that's smashing right through it. But of course, the mother in law didn't see it that way. She pushed back, saying a honeymoon didn't have to mean wearing revealing clothes on public beaches. And here's where cultural and religious undertones come in. The writer and her husband are Muslim, and while the mother in law is more conservative, the writer made it clear this is our relationship, our honeymoon, and it's not for you to comment on. Now, I want to pause here because this is where it gets complicated. Family dynamics, cultural expectations, generational divides, they all come crashing together in moments like this. On one hand, the mother in law may have thought she was protecting her son's new wife from what she views as inappropriate. But on the other hand, the intrusion into personal belongings, the unsolicited commentary, and the lack of respect for boundaries is undeniably invasive. The confrontation left the mother-in-law offended. She claimed the writer was the one without manners. The husband, caught in the middle as so many partners are, tried to smooth things over. He spoke privately to his mother, explaining that even if her intentions were good, the invasion left the writer feeling violated. But the mood was already soured, and the in-laws quickly left, offering a stiff, good trip before heading out. The writer's husband did make a point afterward. He said she probably shouldn't have let his mother near the suitcase at all. And maybe he's right, but let's be honest. Shouldn't the expectation be that someone respects your things without supervision? Should the writer really have to guard her own suitcase against her new mother-in-law? They agreed not to let it ruin their honeymoon, and they moved on. But here's the thing about moments like this. They linger. You can be sitting on a beach thousands of miles away, drink in hand, and it still nags at the back of your mind. Was I too harsh? Did I overreact? Am I the one who's actually in the wrong here? The writer admits it's been on her mind, and that's why she turned to Am I the asshole for judgment. She wanted to clear her conscience to know if she was wrong to stand her ground. She later added that they live in Canada, not with the in-laws, so at least there's some space. And she also addressed the predictable criticism. Some people DM'd her saying her premarital relationship with her husband was sinful or haram. And in her own words, she owned it. They know they're not hypocrites, but that's not the focus here. And honestly, that's what makes this story powerful. It's not about faith or morality, it's about boundaries, about respect, about whether a new wife should have to justify the contents of her own suitcase to anyone, let alone her mother in law. So, is the writer the asshole? No, absolutely not. The writer was pushed into a corner, embarrassed in her own home, her privacy invaded, and then judged for something that wasn't anyone's business. Calling it ill-mannered was mild compared to how most people would have reacted in that moment. The mother-in-law might have thought she was helping, but real help doesn't come with shaming, and it certainly doesn't come from rifling through personal belongings uninvited. This isn't about bikinis or even about conservatism versus modernity. It's about respect. And if there's one thing every marriage needs to survive, it's boundaries. The writer is not the asshole. She's simply demanding the respect she deserves. Am I the asshole for insisting my husband calls our daughter by her given name? Writer, a 30-year-old woman from Japan, has been married to her husband, a 35-year-old European, for 2 years. Their relationship seemed solid, and just recently they welcomed their very first child, a baby girl. Like any couple, they had spent a lot of time before the birth discussing what name to give their daughter. And here's where things start to unravel. Ryder's husband had always imagined having a daughter named Lily. It wasn't just a passing preference. He said it was his dream, a name he had carried in his heart for years. Ryder, however, grew up in Japan, and the pronunciation of certain Western sounds has always been difficult for her, especially the L. To her, giving her child a name she physically struggled to say felt uncomfortable, almost like being cut off from her own daughter's identity. And let's pause here, because imagine that pain. Naming your child something beautiful but never being able to say it clearly. It's not just about speech, it's about intimacy, about connection, about feeling included in your child's world. So Ryder stood her ground. They had long, difficult conversations, sometimes circling around the same argument again and again. Her husband even suggested speech therapy, as if she needed to fix herself just to fit his ideal name. That suggestion stung. Ryder didn't feel broken. She didn't feel impaired. She was simply raised with a different language, different sounds. Should she really have to reshape herself for the sake of a name? Eventually, the couple compromised. They chose Hana, a soft, beautiful name that carries deep meaning in both cultures. It means flower, aligning with his dream of Lily while also honoring her heritage. It seemed perfect, a moment of unity between them. Ryder believed they had closed this chapter with mutual respect, but once the baby was born, cracks appeared again. Ryder noticed something strange. Her husband was calling their daughter Lily, not in front of others, not in front of Ryder, only in private when he thought no one was listening. And here's where things get complicated, because secrecy always feels like betrayal. When Ryder confronted him, he laughed it off. He said it was just a private nickname. No harm done. He insisted that children grow up with multiple names all the time. And while that might be true on the surface, it doesn't erase the sting of broken promises. This wasn't just a pet name. This was the exact name they had agreed not to use. It was the dream she sacrificed so they could find common ground. And now he was slipping it in anyway, behind her back. Ryder felt angry, betrayed, and unsettled. It wasn't just about confusing an infant who, yes, can't yet distinguish names. It was about trust, about respect, about her role as the mother. How can you co-parent effectively if one parent is secretly undoing the compromise you both agreed to? And let's be real, this isn't just about a nickname. This is about identity, about whose voice matters when shaping their child's future. Ryder can't pronounce Lily, so every time her husband uses that name, it feels like a reminder of distance, of exclusion, of being pushed aside in her own daughter's life. So is Ryder the asshole for putting her foot down? My take? No, Ryder is not the asshole. This isn't some petty overreaction. This is a mother fighting for consistency, for respect, for the dignity of the choice they made together. Her husband's actions, even if he thinks they're harmless, cut against the trust in their marriage. A name is powerful. It's the very first gift parents give a child. If that gift is undermined, what message does it send about partnership, promises, and boundaries? Ryder isn't blowing this out of proportion. She's standing up for herself and for her daughter's identity. The husband, on the other hand, needs to ask himself, why does his dream of the name Lily outweigh his wife's comfort, her culture, and the agreement they both made? Because at the end of the day, a child doesn't just carry a name, they carry the weight of the choices behind it.